Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm Jim Zogby. My next guest is Edward Gnehm. He's professor of Gulf and Arabian Peninsula Affairs and director of the Middle East Policy Forum at George Washington University. His long and distinguished career in the U.S. Foreign Service included posts as ambassador to Jordan and Kuwait, as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and of Defense for Near East and South Asia, and was Director General of the Foreign Service for a while. Thanks for joining us, Ed.
Nice to be with you, Jim.
I want to start with Syria. Arab League monitors have now been agreed to by the Syrian government. What does it do? Is it serious, and will it make a difference on the ground, or is this just, as critics are saying, give an opportunity for the government to buy some time here?
I'm in that school that believes the Syrian government is playing for time. It's a very manipulative government. It's been doing this from the beginning. I think the Arab League is doing exactly what it should be doing. There's a unanimity of view that the killings and what's been going on inside Syria has to stop. They've come up with this plan of observers and monitors. You're right, the government has signed a document. What it means, I'm not sure we're clear about the details.
The question is, time for what, though? I mean, at some point, someone has to look out and say, this is not going well. It's not going away, and frankly, it may be even getting worse. Does the government have a way forward? I mean, or are they blinded by their own rhetoric?
Well, I think governments, particularly the kind of government that's in Syria, and we've seen it elsewhere, they're inclined to be myopic in view, internally viewing their lives and existence. I think they believe they can overcome it, that they can play it off, that with enough force, they'll be able to control the situation.
Now, you served in Jordan.
And in Syria, by the way.
That I didn't know, but
yeah.
You were in Jordan, and so the issue in Jordan is a serious one. They have a conflict on one side and now one brewing on the other side. If this devolves, as it seems to be devolving, with more and more folks leaving the military and joining this resistance army, if you will, the danger of civil war is accented. What would be the spillover in the region should that occur?
Well, Jordan has always found itself in the crossroads. It always, I remember when I was there, the king used to say to me, I live between Iraq on the east and Palestine and Israel on the west, Syria to my north, and the Salafis to the south. You know, where is it going to come from? Who knows? But at least we are safe in the middle. I think for them, for Jordan anyway, it's going to be serious because there will be a spillover. But I think that's also true. Lebanon, very delicate political situation always, given the coalition parties there. Iraq, you were talking about that on your program earlier. Look at what's happening there. You're going to have factions playing off against each other. You've got Kurds in Syria. You've got the whole Turkish question as well. And I think that, again, you can't disaggregate Syria from all these other problems.
I'm of the view that the administration, the U.S., I should say, has dealt itself out of the game. In fact, part of the problem being Iraq and the policies of the last 10 years. This is not a situation where...
you mean out of the game in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean in the sense
broadly?
In the sense that Republicans who are arguing with the president saying you should be doing more in Syria, that the president, that there are limits to what the U.S. actually can credibly do or that anybody wants us to do. This is not a situation where the U.S. can get involved. But what can be done at this point with a government that doesn't want to move and an opposition that is not stopping and in fact is growing and taking on a more violent characteristic every day? What does the world do? The Arab League is taking this position of monitors. What's the end game for anyone at this point?
Well, it's an extraordinarily good question. Again, I believe that we're not going to see an end to this resistance. I think it's going to grow. I think it's going to spread. I think it inevitably becomes more violent, which is not in anyone's interest, but it does have a propensity to go that way given the way the government is acting. I think you're going to see regional parties become involved either in providing support.
They already are, I'm sure.
They are indeed. But certainly money and military aid and assistance. There was that talk from Turkey, if you recall, a few weeks ago about maybe even establishing some safe haven zones along the border. Later, it was not clear that that was done with full approval of all the powers in Turkey. But nevertheless, it's under discussion. This is part of what's going on. I think there's going to be more and more support internationally for the resistance efforts, and an increased effort on the part of the globe to sanction the regime, even with tougher sanctions. That will be difficult because of Iraq's position, and of course, again, the situation in Lebanon. But I think over a longer term, I don't think the Assad regime can survive.
Well, let's go to Egypt for a moment.
I do think Egypt will survive.
And there's talk that what happened on January 25th and ultimately on February 11th with the stepping down of the president produced some change, but not that much change. The question is, what actually did happen in Egypt? And help me with that. What did happen from your perspective?
I think that something fundamentally important did happen. But I have been saying, as I talk about this whole sort of unrest, we called it the Arab Spring, which is not a phrase I like to use, but it's certainly been a rising emotion within the people who live in that region, and that in their own country, their own leaders, their own autocracies, regimental regimes, whether it be the intelligence or the military, whatever, have been violent in their direction, have kept the economies from growing due to the greed and corruption, and they've just reacted. This, no more, no more. They went to the streets and they toppled a regime. Now, here's where I think your question gets right on it, and lots of people here in America, and I think elsewhere in the world, don't understand that you still have certain pillars of the country in place. The military is the most obvious one. But the intelligence service, you don't hear much about, but they're there. The Egyptian bureaucracy is historic. It goes back to pharaonic times. I mean, it knows how to survive. So change, yes, there will be change. And I don't think it will ever go back to what it was before. But you cannot discount these other institutions.
But in Egypt, like in Syria, the opposition is not giving in. They continue to go out. And we had this dramatic, and one might suggest, disgraceful display over the weekend of this woman being
it was terrible.
Stripped and stepped on. And
it was outrageous.
And then the demonstration by women. The military and the media attempted to portray the demonstrators as thugs. I mean, they used the language of the old regime. Where does this go? I mean, is it possible to pit the rest of the society against these demonstrators, or will the demonstrators continue to have a role to play in promoting change? I mean, are we at an impasse, or are we still making further progress?
I think we're seeing a migration in almost every one of these groups and factions right now. I had the benefit of talking to a couple of people who were in Tahrir Square or around it at the time of the demonstration you're talking about, and frankly, to my surprise, they said that some of the demonstrators were really thugs. They were throwing concrete at the police. In other words, they were doing the things that, in fact, the government has said was happening. On the other hand, that doesn't, I'm not in any way trying to belittle it. What we saw the military doing, and we saw that incident, which was carried by people who photocopied it, or not, video copied it, right? So it happened. And I think what we're seeing is a military that I don't think really wants to run the country, but it certainly wants to be sure that its position in the country remains where it has been,
Can they retain control? Let me just get folks in the conversation. If you want to call from overseas, the number is 001-202-420-5666. That's right. The number on the screen is right. And from here in the U.S., it's 1-202-420-5730. The military wants to retain control. They've done everything they can to maintain control. Well, and they've even attempted to subvert the parliamentary process by suggesting that the military will be beyond Parliament in terms of budget and accountability. Can they maintain that, or is that going to ultimately have to give way?
It's going to give way, and it already has several times because of, again, what you said, an ongoing public opposition to what has happened. But look, what I was saying earlier was that they have had a privileged position in Egypt, and they're going to try to protect that. But do they want to be president or prime minister? I don't think so. But again, they are a major bloc, faction, strong group within the country. They will have an enormous impact on what happens. But as we've seen, the street is not quiet. It is not accepting. Various factions have stood up to them, and they've backed down. I think we're going to see that tension go on.
So we have power centers. We have the military. We have the recently elected parliament, which is still not seated and not functioning. And then we have this group of demonstrators that seem to ebb and flow with time and take on new characteristics. Sometimes you have the Brotherhood participating, sometimes not, etc. Will this drama continue to play out then?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. There's too much uncertain about the situation.
Let's go to California for a call. Caller, your question. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, your question.
Yes. I believe all of this is happening because of the disastrous war we had with Iraq and destroying the country. Am I right or wrong?
The disaster happening in Egypt?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I get the connection here, but let me ask Ambassador Gnehm.
Well, in response to the questioner, I have said from the beginning that our entry into Iraq was a cataclysmic event, and that it erupted and changed the whole political situation, power, relationships in the Middle East. It removed Iraq as a major player at the time. Did it cause what we see in Tunisia and in Egypt? I don't think so. I think these are factors that really did come out of those countries themselves.
Let's go to Texas for a call. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
My name is Evelina Marjorie. I have a question.
Sure.
Now that myself, I would like to know what we here in the United States can do. I'm not talking about the government,
sure,
because I see we as citizens, what can we do regarding Israel and Palestine? Because evidently Netanyahu is lying, and the Israeli government is. I'm not.
I get your question. I'm going to stop you there. It's a bit off topic, but I want to get Ed Gnehm in on it. Ambassador?
The question
was, what can we in the U.S. do? And she specifically wanted to talk about Israel-Palestine. But is there a role for public opinion and for public diplomacy here?
There is very much a role for the United States to play. And yes, the instrument of our power abroad is both government, but it's also non-government. There are lots of non-governmental organizations active in the region. National Democratic Institute, the IRI for the Republican side. Very, very active in terms of the political situation, voters, training people. This is very, very important. But our government does react to public opinion. And therefore, if a person like the caller has a strong view of actions that U.S. government should be taking, I would encourage her to make those opinions known to her elected officials.
Talk to me about the U.S. government role in this Egypt drama. We certainly had a role during the Mubarak period in terms of urging the military caution and calm and keeping them from moving too far afield in terms of reaction. And the administration has patted itself on the back for that. Is there a role now?
Oh, definitely. We have interest. Our interests are to see that Egypt develop with a strong participatory government where the people's rights and liberties are protected, where things like that incident in the street with the woman don't take place, or if they do, the people who undertake it are taken to court, are tried, and dealt with. So we can put our shoulder to have things go in that direction. We have a relationship with the military, and we should use it.
Let's go to Saudi Arabia for a call. Caller?
Yes, hello, this is Faisal from Saudi Arabia.
Hi.
Hi, I have a question about, we've been noticing a growing role for Qatar in the past few years, and I mean, the role is shifting from Saudi Arabia to Qatar, apparently, and there are ambitions for Qatar for leadership in the Gulf and also in the Arab League. We've heard some conspiracy theories about Qatar wanting to some division in Saudi Arabia and consuming more roles over there. So I want to get some highlights on the American role in that, and what kind of partnership is forming in the future.
Okay, thank you. The question about Qatar's role and conspiracies that may be involved in this, but let me just start with a smaller question. Is Qatar boxing above its weight right now?
Well, I think Qatar has always sought to be dynamic and to prove that it was bigger than it really is. And when I say it that way, I mean it has a small population. It is a small geographic country, but it's also a very wealthy country, as are some of the others in the Gulf. And I think the Emir has been very dynamic in projecting Qatar in both diplomatic and military when it came to Libya. There's always competition in the Gulf among the different states, but Qatar is not going to supplant Saudi Arabia in terms of influence or in terms of ability to lead the region. Saudi Arabia is a critically important country, a big country with its own wealth and with a dynamic leadership of its own. And I don't see it as a zero-sum game here.
Ambassador Skip Gnehm, thank you for joining us. Let me just tell the caller who called from Texas, not plugging my book, but I am. The book Arab Voices, if you look, you can find it online. It has a chapter in the back called What We Can Do, and it's all about what citizens can do in their communities around the country to engage on all of these issues. There are a lot of things you can do, so take a look. Up next, we're going to hear the latest on how GOP candidates are faring in Iowa. We're going to talk to pollster Ann Seltzer. She's the famous Iowa pollster, and we'll take some more of your calls, so don't go away.